All right, now it is time for the top five segment, man. And this week, it's very interesting. We teased it at the top of the show. We promise you we're not psychotic, but it is
Or
top
are
five,
we?
or are we? Top five serial killer films. This one
Yes.
was very interesting, and I tried to be a little loose with it, so you'll see on my first two picks. My number five goes to Sherlock Holmes. You want to know why? Because the villain in RDJ Sherlock Holmes, the first one, is a serial killer.
It's
He's going
true.
around London just killing a whole bunch of people.
It's true.
But I think this was a good introduction to Sherlock Holmes, which is like everybody's been so fascinated with this character for so long, going back to the books and the stories like in the 1800s. And then RDJ comes along, Jude Law comes along. I feel like their dynamic is so freaking amazing. But yeah, I really love their interpretation of it. I hope a third one does get made. There's been rumors about it for so long. Um, I, but honestly, I prefer the second Sherlock Holmes over the first Sherlock Holmes.
Mm.
I don't know why. Very, very interesting complex there, but overall, I love the franchise. I love what they're doing. And again, I hope for the third one. But number five for me is Sherlock Holmes, RDJ's version.
There you go. Admittedly, I've only seen the first one. I haven't seen the second one, so I need to
Yeah,
watch the second one. I think
for
that's,
sure.
yeah, that's going to be good. And then I'm sitting here the whole time we're talking and you're leading and everything, and I'm just thinking to myself and laughing like, what a great guest interview to lead into this when we're talking about how she's just dying to play an evil character and that we're going to
Yeah,
write her somebody evil and a villain. It's like, you want to play a serial killer? It's like, there was the
fantastic.
perfect transition into this thing. I'm a little, yeah. And then I'm also thinking about myself and how, like, maybe weird I am because I really, really like my five movies that I picked. They're like all some of my favorite movies. And what does that say about me? I don't know. My number five is extremely wicked, shockingly evil, and vile. The Zac Efron film star about Ted Bundy. Um, I thought it was brilliantly done. It's based on the Ted Bundy tapes. And Zac Efron, if you're going to pick a guy that's like, good looking and charismatic and easily fallen for, right? Zac was the perfect guy to play Ted Bundy because that's how
For sure.
everybody described Ted Bundy. Just this good looking, charismatic, charming guy that everybody fell for. But a fucking psychopath. But yeah, this one I thought was, it like I said, based on the tapes, but I thought it did a really good job of diving past the tapes and giving you a little bit more of, and in some eerie, creepy ways, kind of made you feel sad for him or
It did.
sympathetic towards him, right? Like, and I guess that's what you have to do with any of these type movies, right? You have to have the audience feel
For
some
sure.
sort of sympathy for these guys because they're freaking psychotic killers, and you don't want them turning it off after the first 5 minutes. So you've got to find a way to make these people appealing, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, this
Which is kind of sad.
It is kind of sad, but I mean, but to his credit, Zach did an amazing job, and the film was really good. And I would watch them as companion pieces. I would say because the guy that did the documentary of the Ted Bundy tapes, it did the film also, and so I would watch
Yeah.
them as a companion type thing. Watch the film and then listen to the tapes, the real life tapes, and yeah, it's scary. I'm not gonna lie,
Yeah.
it's fucking scary, man. But hey, yeah.
Hey. Oh my goodness. Number four for me goes to the Batman. You're like, what? Serial killer movies? Well, if you think about it, the antagonist, the Riddler, Paul Dano's character, is a serial killer.
Yes.
And it's a very like honed into reality type of film. So that's why it goes on the list. But I mean, this was something we've really never seen before when it comes to our superhero movies. Of course, there's always that lightheartedness. The color tones are different, but this just feels like a hardcore Gotham, dark, edgy serial killer, like dealing with politics, like all of these different things. This movie was so set in reality that, like I said, it's never really been done like this before. That's why it's so special, and that's why Paul Dano's version of the Riddler is so special, because this could happen in nowadays life. People could go on their spree to where like people end up dead. And I just, what they did with this film, Matt Reeves, that was just absolutely amazing. So that's why I had to put it on my list. I mean, it's so good. I almost watched that one last night too.
Yeah, yeah, I want to rewatch that one myself. It's
So
so
good.
funny because that kind of plays into my number four also. Man, I agree with you. I like it. It was very much a noir detective film. Everybody
It
forgets
was.
that Batman is the world's greatest detective. And this was him literally figuring out clues being left by a serial killer to try
Yeah.
to clue you in on who he was and why he was doing it, which I thought was brilliant. I fucking loved it from start to finish. And then that
Yeah.
brings me to my number four, which is exactly that, but unfortunately was real. My number
Mm,
four is Zodiac. And the
yeah.
Zodiac killer was, if I'm not mistaken, from like the late 60s all the way to the early 80s. And like the biggest, most famous unsolved serial killer crime in American history. Eventually they did finally figure it out. But this guy was terrorizing California, killing people, like I said, from like the late 60s through the early 80s. And what made it so unusual is that he sent three huge newspapers at the time this encrypted letter with like code, like an old Egyptian code type thing or whatever, that literally had clues in it that if you could decipher the encryption, it told you who he was and where to find him. And these reporters and these people were like, this one reporter that's played by Robert Downey Jr. So that, let me get into it. First of all, the cast. You got Mark Ruffalo,
So good.
Gyllenhaal. Oh my God. Mark Ruffalo, Gyllenhaal, Robert Downey Jr. Like I can't even. Like every A-lister that you can think of was in this movie, and they were all just phenomenal. But there's this character that he becomes like a raging alcoholic, obsessive with trying to figure out these clues and figure out who
Yeah.
this guy is. And yeah, it was a
Oh,
brilliant
damn.
movie. It was a
Yeah.
brilliant movie. But yeah, I don't know any other way to say it, but talk about terrifying, right? Because everything nowadays is like encrypted and like, this idea that you could just tease law enforcement for nearly 20 years and nobody could fucking figure it out. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, you need
It's
Batman. Like, what? Shit. Like,
it is really crazy. Brian Cox, Anthony Edwards,
yeah,
John Carroll Lynch,
oh my God. Yeah.
yeah,
Just this,
Candy Clark, like June Diane Raphael,
I
like
mean, just
Dermot Mulroney. Yeah.
yeah, this whole cast, like you line them up, they're in there, and they all brilliant. I think like they all give like Oscar-worthy performances. I shit you not. It's like that good of a film. And it was obscure. I had never heard of it. I was just flipping through like HBO
Yeah.
Max one time and saw it. And I'm like, what the fuck is this with all these people in it? Then I watch it and I'm like, holy shit, how did I not hear about this when it was out in theaters? Like it was
Right.
just amazing. But yeah, number
Yeah.
four for me, Zodiac.
Love it. Love it. Number three for me, I feel like is it's a cult classic, definitely a guilty pleasure, I feel like, but it's the Scream franchise. Come on. I mean, who doesn't love the Scream franchise? Of course you got some little ones in the middle there, but I mean, what they're doing nowadays with Jenna Ortega and all the new cast members that they're bringing into it, I feel like it's very special, and it's giving a new look at horror when we are in the age of horror.
Yeah.
So I just think it's a whole lot of fun. It is very serial killer-esque, and they normally always get the killer right in that first line of dialogue or in that first monologue. You know what I'm talking about, where they're all sitting down, where it's like, it has to be one of you. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
I mean, you can put on any of these movies and watch them. They're so fun.
No, it's hilarious because they do tell you who the killer is every time. They tell you who it is. And what I like about this, though, it reminds me of another serial killer movie that didn't make the list, but it was with Harry Connick Jr. called Copycat. because Scream's serial killers are they're copycat killers. Each Scream killer is a different person copycatting the original Scream killer, and so it's a very interesting cycle of serial killers that are copycats. And yeah, it's an interesting look to put on the list because it is indeed serial killers, but then yeah, a different take for sure.
Yeah.
My number 3. You can't be my age and not put this one on the list. I mean, you pretty much have to be any age and put this one on the list. And I'm talking, of course, about Silence of the Lambs. Anthony Hopkins, Jodie Foster. I mean, fuck. If you weren't terrorized by Hannibal Lecter, like, what the fuck? I mean, this was one of the most terrifying psychological thrillers, like, in decades to hit the screens. Oh, yeah. It left you thinking, and it left you scared that there are people, because it's based on a true story, and that like there are people, cannibal serial killers, not just a serial killer, but cannibal, eating you and shit, like Jeffrey Dahmer and shit, like, you know.
Yeah.
That's terrifying that people like that exist in the world. And this movie, the way he fucked with Jodie Foster's Clarissa, you know, the FBI agent, the way he fucked with her and just like had her completely under his control, even though he's wearing this like freaking mask and he's behind this glass thing and he's like, no way that he can get to her, and yet completely owned her. And that is terrifying. That is like the bone-chilling serial killer shit that you don't want to go to sleep with. Like it's like thinking about that people like that exist. It's like, what the fuck? So yeah, it had to be on my list. Number 3, Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, that's so funny. Number 2 for me is one that I feel like doesn't necessarily get talked about a lot. I'm really going through a big Kevin Costner phase, I guess, because of Yellowstone, going back and finishing season 5. But I love Mr. Brooks. Basically, he's this businessman who everybody looks up to in his established, I forget what like type of thing he's doing, but he's a serial killer and he targets like couples, basically after they have sex. Like he watches them and then kills them, which is absolutely terrifying. But this one also has a very notable cast. I mean, you got like Demi Moore, obviously Kevin Costner, Dane Cook, William Hurt, like so many others. So it's definitely one that I feel like not a lot of people talk about anymore, because I mean, it came out in 2007. But it's definitely one that I feel like people should go back and watch, especially nowadays with the storytelling aspect of it, because yes, there is a lot of horror, but I also feel like it's a lot of like a, I guess, supernatural horror type S, not like serial killer horror. So yeah, I really, really enjoy this one and definitely need to rewatch that one here soon. But yeah, number 2 for me, Mr. Brooks.
Well, there you go. And Mr. Brooks, I feel like, took a lot of story elements from my number 2, which in very similar, and you'll see why when I say my number 2, and this is the one I was like joking about at the top of this thing, because this is one of my all-time favorite movies, and I fucking love the character. I love it. It's like, and I don't know what that says about me, but here it is. American Psycho with Christian Bale. This is in the height of the 80s, the big 80s era of yuppies, young urban professionals, and he's an investment banker, extremely rich, and he gets off by killing people. That's his thing. Like by day he's an investment banker, at night he's a serial killer, and he takes pure joy in the death and pain and torture of people. He gets off on it. Like, that's his thing. Sexual, non-sexual, it's like that's his thing. In order to get high, to get feeling good about himself, to get that thing that he needs, he kills people for the joy. And he likes doing it, and he doesn't feel bad about it. There's no remorse. He's just literally pumped up to kill people. And it is, again, a terrifying, because nobody would know. This is a rich, successful investment banker, played brilliantly by Christian Bale. You think everything is perfect in his world. He's got the perfect apartment. He's got all the money. He's got the pretty girlfriend. He's got all these things. And he's not happy. He's miserable. And the only way he can be happy is to fucking torture and kill people. Like,
Yeah.
it's just a great soundtrack, 80s soundtrack. I mean, come on, Huey Lewis in the News is just all. There's even a joke about he asks, "You like Huey Lewis in the News?" It's one. Yeah, he's got some of the greatest quotes in movie history come from that movie, which again is terrifying but true. And
Yeah.
hey,
The Walking on Sunshine gets me every time.
Oh my
After
gosh.
a night of killing people, he comes into the office
Yeah.
listening to a Walking on Sunshine.
Yes, it's so fucking brilliant. And for anybody who doesn't know, not just Christian Bale, but a young Reese Witherspoon is in that movie. Yeah, Reese Witherspoon, his girlfriend at one point, or prospective target at one point also. You got to check it out if you haven't seen it. And by all means, do not check out the sequel. No. Don't do that. It was with a female. It was Mia Kunis. She probably still regrets it to this day. Don't check out the sequel. It just, they tried to capitalize. It failed miserably. It was nowhere close to the original. But you cannot not watch the original. It's fucking brilliant film. From a filmmaking aspect, it's brilliant. And it's kind of creepy. It's creepy.
There you go.
But that's this list. Brilliant, but creepy.
Yeah. Literally. So funny. Well, number one for me is a must-see film. If you guys haven't yet, I don't know what it says about Paul Dano because he plays a fucking crazy, like really good serial killer type of person.
Yeah, he does.
And then you look at him in The Fabelmans, and you're like, oh, he's actually a really good, nice dad. But I'm talking about Prisoners.
Yes.
Now, talk about the cast in this one. I think it's honestly one of Hugh Jackman's best films ever.
Oh, without doubt.
I think it's one of Gyllenhaal's best performances ever. But I mean, come on. You have Viola Davis, you have Terrence Howard, you have Paul Dano, you have Melissa Leo. So many freaking people. Wayne Duvall. Oh my goodness. But just basically, if your child gets abducted and then the news comes out with this is who we think is doing these things, and then the dad just goes crazy. It's such a good movie, man. Like that one scene where like Hugh Jackman has a hammer and he's like freaking out, like, oh, it's amazing. Absolutely love it. And I feel like this is what any parent would do if he felt like he would have that suspected serial killer in his grasp, I guess you could say. But so good. If you guys haven't seen it, it's a solid 8.1 out of 10 on IMDb. It deserves more than that, in my opinion. But yeah, be sure to check it out. Prisoners, my number one.
Yeah, no, it's a brilliant fucking movie, and I totally agree with you. One of my all-time favorite Hugh Jackman performances. And yeah, Gyllenhaal and Dano both, again, playing in these serial killer movies. But yeah, I mean, if you're a parent, you know. I can tell you right now, if anybody ever hurt my daughter, I would kill them. I would hunt them down and kill them. And if somebody told me who they were, fucking forget. Even worse, I'd be going right to it and doing it. So I think that's why that movie worked so well, because every parent could connect to Hugh Jackman's character. Everybody could go, hey, yeah, that's me. I would do that in a heartbeat. And nobody would feel bad for me. And nobody would convict me. Right? Because that's the thing. Who's going to convict a guy that's killing somebody who killed their kid? Right? I just, oh my gosh. Yeah, so good. All right. My number one, maybe the most successful of all serial killer movies ever.
Yeah.
And you know why? Because of the question, what's in the box, man?
Facts.
I'm talking about Seven. Morgan Freeman. And your boy Brad Pitt, Gwyneth Paltrow.
Of course.
And Kevin Spacey. Who, by the way, never credited in the film.
Interesting.
Never credited in the film, and that was intentional. They wanted to keep it that way. They didn't want you to know who the killer was, and so they intentionally don't credit him in the film. But of course, if you've seen the film, you know it's Kevin Spacey, and it's a brilliant whodunit detective, have to solve it type serial killer movie, and the guy bases his killings on the 7 deadly sins, hence 7. Gluttony and vanity and just think of all the sins, and this is how he kills people. Is based on the 7 sins, and creepy as shit. I mean, just like really, and unfortunately, I mean, Kevin Spacey plays this guy fucking brilliantly, and maybe we know why now. But yeah, not saying Kevin Spacey's a serial killer. Just come at me. I'm just fucking crazy. Come on. Yeah. I mean, how can anybody? You can't not love this movie, right? It's like a young Brad Pitt. Really, I think this is the movie that kind of cemented him and like establishes him in the, okay, now he's a movie star. Now he's the A-lister movie star, right? And Gwyneth Paltrow and I mean, come on, Morgan Freeman. The three of them play off each other so well. And the old cop, young cop, grizzled, like, learn from me, but you can learn from me also type storyline played into it brilliantly. And it's just, yeah, I can't say enough about it. This thing was brilliant.
So good, man. So good. Well, we want to know, what are your favorite serial killer movies? Please be sure to comment below in the YouTube section or add us on Twitter or Threads, because we love the interaction. We just want to know. We love getting to know all the fun stuff.